Okay, so you ever wake up from like a really long nap
Mhm.
and it's like the whole world kind of shifted while you were out? That's kind of what we're getting at today with Washington Irving's Rip Van Winkle, right? Like
Right.
everybody knows his story, but we're going deeper this time with all our sources here. Like what's the meaning behind it all? What's the
Hmm.
symbolism? Why are we still talking about this story centuries later, you know?
Yeah, and it's funny how a story that seems so simple on the surface, guy takes a nap, can actually be this really profound exploration of like change and responsibility
Mhm.
and even like what does freedom really mean. So we're going to unpack all of that and hopefully connect some dots that maybe you haven't thought of before.
I love that. All right, so let's jump right in with our main man, Rip. Like, what's the deal with this guy? He's kind of lazy, right? Or is he? So sources actually go back and forth on whether he's just a slacker
Yep.
or if there's something more to it.
It is tempting to just label him as lazy, but it's interesting when you look at him as this guy who's like rejecting the whole idea of like what was considered profitable labor at the time, almost like he's allergic to it. It makes you wonder, is Rip actually searching for something deeper, like a different definition of freedom?
Ooh, that's a good point. Especially with Dame Van Winkle always on his case. I mean, she's definitely painted as the villain, right? Like this overbearing wife, but maybe it's not that simple.
That's the question, isn't it? It's like the chicken or the egg thing.
Right.
Did Rip's aversion to work turn her into like this force of nature? Or was it the opposite? Was it her nagging that made him want to escape to the mountains in the first place?
Yeah, poor Rip. Speaking of the mountains, though, those Catskill Mountains are practically a character in their own right.
Totally. Like, Irving really goes out of his way to describe them as this almost magical presence. He talks about their magical hues and fantastic shapes. It's almost like he's setting them up as this force of change, like something mysterious and powerful is about to happen.
Which brings us to the nap to end all naps. The dude drinks something he probably shouldn't have, passes out, and boom, 20 years just vanish.
And those weren't just any 20 years. This is 18th century America, right?
Right.
He slept through the entire American Revolution. Think about that for a second. Waking up to a world where everything you thought you knew was completely different, that's Rip's reality.
Talk about culture shock, right? And it's not just the politics, it's everything. Our sources point out how much the village itself has changed. The people he knew, the places he went, even his favorite inn is now this completely different place. It's like a physical representation of how much time can change things sometimes without us even realizing.
And that's where the symbolism of the inn versus the Union Hotel becomes really interesting.
Yeah, represents that old world. It's cozy, it's familiar, it represents tradition and simple pleasures.
And then the Union Hotel, that's the new America. It's
Yeah.
all about progress, politics, commerce. It's a bit overwhelming, honestly, even for the reader. It's such a stark contrast.
Yeah.
And remember, those oddly dressed dudes Rip meets right before his nap.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out, there's this whole theory about who they might actually be. Local folklore says they could be the ghosts of Hendrik Hudson and his crew. They're said to return to the Catskills every 20 years to, like, watch over the river.
Wait, so Rip might have shared a drink with ghosts. That adds a whole new dimension.
Like, it's this whole other layer to the story, this blend of history and folklore and imagination. It really makes you question what's real and what's made up, especially because, like, even within the story, Rip Van Winkle is presented as this almost historical account.
Right, totally.
Right.
Like, it's a story that's supposed to have been passed down through generations.
Yeah.
And there's even a character who claims to have met, like, Rip's descendant or something and heard the story firsthand. It's so clever how Irving plays with that line between truth and fiction.
It really makes you think about how we create our own narratives about history. But, okay, so we've got this backdrop of revolution, a sprinkle of the supernatural, and at the center of it all is this guy who, let's be honest, kind of just wants to avoid responsibility.
No.
Is Rip really searching for freedom or just running away from his problems? What do you think?
Right. It's the question of the hour. And honestly, our sources had some pretty interesting takes on this. Like, on one hand, you could totally see Rip as this symbol of, like, pure individual freedom. He's escaping a tough marriage, societal pressures, and even the demands of a whole new nation.
It's like that fantasy we all have of just dropping off the grid,
Right.
just ditching it all and living in the woods. But here's the thing. Rip's freedom isn't without its consequences.
For sure. He basically ghosts his family and his community. Like, talk about avoiding responsibility.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting because the story isn't about whether Rip is right or wrong. It's about the complexities of freedom itself. What are the limits? Can you truly be free without any responsibility? These are questions that are still so relevant today, even centuries after Irving wrote the story.
It's like he's saying, hey, freedom's great and all, but it's complicated, which, let's be real, is something we all need to hear sometimes.
100%. And the way Irving uses contrast in the story to highlight these themes is brilliant. We talked about the Inn versus the Union Hotel.
Right, the old world versus the new.
Exactly. But it's even more than that. It's about the feeling those places evoke, the language Irving uses. The Inn is all about warmth and community and laughter, like time moves slower there. But the Union Hotel, it's all sharp edges and political debates and this relentless focus on progress. Like, even if it means leaving some people behind.
Talk about a reality check. Can you imagine going from napping in a rocking chair to suddenly being surrounded by people arguing about a president you've never even heard of?
Right. It's hilarious, but it also gets at this really human experience of change being jarring. Like, how do we deal with these big shifts that happen in our lives? Do we cling to the familiar, like Rip does at first? Or do we adapt and move forward?
It's like when you finally get a new phone after, 10 years, and you have no idea how to work anything anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're like Rip Van Winkle with an iPhone. But it gets at that same fear, that feeling of being left behind. Like the world is changing too fast and you can't keep up. But the interesting thing is, even though Rip is thrown into this totally new world, he eventually finds his footing again.
He does. I always love that about the endings. Everything around him is different. But Rip is still Rip. He's still that same guy at heart. He still loves a good story. Still probably wouldn't win any Employee of the Month awards.
Right. Some things never change. And that's what makes Rip Van Winkle such a timeless story. It's not just about one specific time period or political event. It's about these universal human experiences, this tension between wanting to escape and also needing to find our place in the world.
Totally. I feel like everyone knows a Rip. But that one friend who's just happy to sit back, watch the world burn, and maybe offer a sarcastic comment every now and then.
For sure. And that's what makes it so fun to read. It's funny, it makes you think, and it's even a little squeaky with those ghost drinking buddies.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a story about what it means to be human, with all our flaws and contradictions and everything.
You said it. Honestly, we could probably talk about this story for another hour.
Oh, easily. There's just so much to unpack.
Right. It's a story you can reread 100 times and still find something new, which I guess is the mark of a true classic.
100%. It stays with you, it makes you think, and it leaves you wanting more.
Well said. All right, so for everyone listening, we'll leave you with this. If you took a page from Rip's book and woke up 20 years from now, what do you think would surprise you the most about the world? And what would you miss the most from the world as we know it?